I had done a jelly plate series with these lined textured papers. This was for my 5x7 jelly plate. And today I'm going to show you how I made those textures. I got myself a bigger jelly plate, the 8x10, and now I wanted to make these line textures for my larger jelly plate. So we're going to be making 3 different sizes. The type of cardstock that I used was this Nina White cardstock, 300 sheets, 110 pound. First, we're going to start by making the grid paper. These are going to be 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch squares all the way across the page. So here I'm using a scoreboard and I'm just going to score down at every 1/4 inch. And I think right now I am on the long side of the paper, so you just follow all the way down the length of this until you have the whole paper scored. It will start to wrinkle up on you, but that's okay. This part does take a while because these are such small score lines, the 1/4 inch. And this is the grid paper. I did this one first because I knew this one was going to take the most amount of time. You might notice my paper was sliding a little bit as I was doing this. I'm really having to hold it really tight at the top here, just so that it doesn't slide down each time I'm making my lines. So here I finished the grid. Next we're going to make the narrow lined notebook texture. And we're going to be doing the same thing where we score at every 1/4 inch all the way down this side of the paper. And I did end up taping my paper down to see if that would help it from moving, and this really did work. So if you're trying this for yourself, I definitely recommend putting that tape down. This is just painter's tape and it really helped it stay put and it made it go a lot faster. Just be careful when you're taking the tape off. It does stick a little, but this is the back side of my texture, so I wasn't too concerned about it. It's not going to affect how I jelly plate print with it. So then I'm doing this 3/4 inch line down the page here. This is, if you had a notebook, it would be like that red line that you would see. And there we have it. This is the narrow lined texture paper. But one more thing I wanted to add were these holes. These are just circle punch holes. It's a Memory Keepers hole punch system. I think it's for making mini albums, but I just use it to punch holes. So I'm just finding where my lines or my circles line up at the edge here and just completing them out. I thought I'd maybe be able to add one more circle, but it wouldn't fit. So I just left it with the circles that I could punch. So for the last one, we're going to do the wide line paper. These are scored every 1/2 inch versus every 1/4 inch. And now I'm using that same tape over again. And just like before, except I'm starting at the 1/2 inch mark, the 1.5, just going all the way down the page, 1/2 inch markers apart. This one's the fastest one because the lines are not as close together. And then the same thing here, I am going to make that one line down the side of the page, the 3/4 inch mark. I will hole punch this one as well. And now we have our 3 textures all complete and ready for printing. I'll do a demo with these papers on my larger gel plate. This is the gel press. I'm just going to put some copper paint, acrylic paint down first, and that's what I'm going to have my lines pull from. This is the grid texture that I'm going to use first. I'm not pressing super hard on this one. So I didn't pull up too much. If I had pressed harder, I would have pulled up a lot more of that paint. For this first one, I went light, and then I put some color behind it because this is what I'm going to use to pull up my print. Just to see how those squares came out. I think they turned out really good. Again, the more pressure you apply, the more there'll be like holes, and the less pressure you apply, the more there'll be like lines. It's hard to explain, but you could play around with how hard you press your texture into the jelly plate. So now I'm going to do the next texture. This time I decided to roll off onto one of my 5x7 jelly plates so I can kind of get a second print going. This time I'm using the narrow lined notebook paper. Just using this piece of paper to pull those holes. And that's my grid paper that I had made for my 5x7 jelly plate. So I pressed harder on this one, and you can see the lines, they aren't as visible. It's maybe a little more distressed, and more of it was picked up on that texture plate, the lined notebook texture. So this is how this one's going to turn out, is going to be less vibrant with the copper than the first one that I did. So this little one has just little grids on it. That one looks really cool on the edges. And then this one, it just has some more faint lines. So for this last one, I'm going to be doing the wide texture, using my small jelly plate again to roll off my extra paint. So for this texture, I pressed pretty hard on this one. Pressed so hard I pulled up a lot of it, and I decided to go back in with a little more paint to try to press a little bit lighter. So this is where you have to kind of play around with how hard you're pressing. Now I just kind of pressed down the lines, and I'm putting some more paint on the back of this. I'm also using the small jelly plate so that I'm not having as much blotchy paint on my large jelly print. And I'm just using the other side of that piece of paper for the small one, and then for my larger one, I'm gonna see what that one turns out like. This one turned out pretty cool. That's the wide notebook paper, not pressing as hard, or pressing, yeah, lighter, and then this one I pressed a little bit harder, so you could see looks a little bit different. I like to use these textures as kind of like almost like a ghosting, so a little bit on the edges or the borders. In this case, I was doing the whole print in that texture, but most of the time when I use these textures, I just use a little bit of it here and there. But you can use these textures however you like, and I hope that this was something that would be helpful for you in understanding how I made these lined notebook textures and the grid textures. If you like this video, don't forget to press the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I want to say thank you to Michelle for suggesting this video, so thank you, Michelle. You can also leave a comment below if you have any suggestions on some tips or tricks that you'd like to see in the next video. Thanks for watching.